The Bitcoin halving came and went, and now pressure has been pushing the market down, and a lot of people are concerned. We had some threats of World War III and some other big concerns that generally push the market down, as well as after the halving, usually Bitcoin trades sideways for, 6 months, 3 months. It seems to be decreasing since many cycles ago, but we'll see how this one plays out. Where is it all going to go? Well, keep in mind that there's still a lot of pressure pushing the Bitcoin price up. So we're going to dig into the price action to see what clues we can find. Today, we're joined from Paul from Definity. We couldn't do our Wednesday show, so we're able to schedule it still this week and have it today. There's no one better to be joining us and sharing his insights. Welcome to the Crypto Rain channel and our family. If you, like me, came into crypto because you realize that there is massive potential for life-changing gains, but over a 4 to 8 year period, and you're looking for discussions on becoming a solid, unshakable, and savage crypto investor, like a Navy SEAL of crypto investing, you're in exactly the right place and with the right family, the Rainmaker family. Now, I created this channel because I was once new to crypto 7 years ago, and I wanted to find a crypto channel and a group that understood crypto as an investment and discuss the important things like investment cycles, specific projects and the pros and cons of those projects and the risks and guess the upside if it came together well. I didn't find it like I was looking for, so we created it. And I say it's we because it's a family of us now. And you'll see our Rainmakers here in the chat. You will see some in our free Telegram group, and the link to that is below. And you will definitely find them in our private Patreon group. The Patreon group allows you access to where the discussion really is in the private Rainmaker Discord. This is where the best discussion, best info is. There's other benefits too, but you'd have to join us to find out. Do note I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a crypto investor myself, and Paul invests in many different markets. None of this would be taken as financial advice. So if you haven't already, make it rain on that like button. Strap in for the show because Paul from Definity is joining us.
Great to be here as always, and I get a chance to say happy Friday, which is something I've never been able to say on the show before. So happy Friday, everyone. Great to be here. Very interesting week that we're just ending. Most important thing I think to talk about was that the Fed met on Wednesday. There was not a movement in interest rates, which was kind of 99% expected by the market. But in typical market fashion, they tend to fit around whatever the Fed says to what they want the market to do. And what I mean by that is, we've been talking about how the dollar is ready to go down and it's at the end of the move rather than the beginning, and that all these tensions that were happening in the Middle East will probably evaporate. Well, lo and behold, the Fed just said they're not going to hike rates. Not that they're not going to drop rates, just they're not going to hike rates. And that's caused the dollar to drop and a sigh of relief to be, expelled by the market. And now we're seeing a bit of a rally into the Friday, and risk on seems to be back on the table. Now, Bitcoin's fallen about 23% from its high, and we were looking at how it made a topping pattern and it broke the level that indicated that it should go lower. And that might not be a straight line move, but if the market is disappointed in the fall, I think that may be displaced. And I'm only saying that because something that has been rallying as far and as fast and as hard as Bitcoin needs to have a correction. It is unsustainable to move up too fast, and eventually that can cause a bigger crash, and it will cause a crash further down the line, but we're not actually at those points yet. So we're in a corrective phase where I think a consolidation is exactly what the market not only will get, but kind of needs really. Now, it's happened during the halving, and that's very typical because people need, when they're not looking at technicals and we're not following the market in any depth, they tend to just hang on to something, one single thing that they think should drive the market, the halving. But that's a kind of misunderstanding of how markets work, because markets work on the basis of information that isn't available to everybody, not information that is available to everybody. So if everybody knows about the halving, you have no advantage or disadvantage in knowing about the halving. It's already kind of factored into the price. It's adjusted to it. Now, further down the line, when it starts rallying, people might look back and say, yeah, we had a correction, but because of the halving, it kept going up. And people who write news headlines are very different from people who trade the markets. They've got a job to tell you what is happening. And whereas people who trade the markets have got to be thinking ahead and also disseminating or analyzing, I should say, what the sentiment is and how that might play out in the markets. So it was fairly clear that the market got a little bit hot, but not too hot, not hot to the extent where it's time for a crash, it's time to bail out, more that it's time for a correction. And we were waiting to see whether that correction would involve a move into altcoins, whether some of the altcoins would rally, some of the ones that had kind of stuck around, not done a lot, or whether it just be a broad-based correction. And at one point, the market was kind of fearful enough to be selling everything, but we still do need to see if the altcoins are going to settle down, maybe outperform Bitcoin. We'll have to see how that plays out. But certainly, I mean, Solana seems to be popping up as being a bit more of a bullish pattern still, which is kind of interesting. So there's a couple of hot points here and there, but generally, I think the market overall needs to go into consolidation phase before we see the next move up. As you know, with equities are something I follow very closely because they pertain to how much risk people want to take. And we are seeing quite a nice Friday rally here in the Dow and the S&P 500, which we can have a look at on the charts in a bit. But it's context is always really important. It's a rally from a correction as opposed to a rally into a new high. So I'm going to be a little bit more guarded about the short term until we've seen a longer consolidation here. And so we might see a bit more of a dip in the equity markets, which ironically may allow the Fed to later on cut interest rates. There could be some negative news coming in, and it could be that non-farm payrolls, which is going to be out next week, that could be weaker than expected, or inflation or something like that. So the market's now got wind of some potential for negative data, but they will take negative data as a positive, if that makes sense. So anything that allows the market to keep the possibility of interest rate cuts alive, they will latch onto that. And so we'll be looking at the data very closely. But one very important piece in the puzzle is the US dollar. And the US dollar is starting to weaken and looks as though it could be at the start of something quite major. And that, I think, would be really interesting.
Agreed. I'm curious to see your analysis on what's going on with the DXY. As many of the viewers already know, as the dollar goes up, a lot of the money comes out of risk-on assets. And as the dollar goes down, a lot of the money fuels into risk-on assets. It's been a little bit weird the past 6 months, and that's in some cases the dollar's been going up. And yet risk-on assets such as crypto, or crypto is commonly seen as a risk-on asset. I would make the argument that it's a risk-off asset, but the market hasn't generally agreed with that yet. Although the last 6 months we've been seeing in situations where the dollar is going up, crypto has also been going up, or Bitcoin specifically.
Yeah, the nice thing, the interesting thing about crypto assets, and it's something that's really worthwhile. It's an important asset class because it's in some ways non-correlated. And you might wonder, well, hang on, what does that mean, and why does it even matter? It matters because the correlation for Bitcoin, when you're trading a big fund, you're not looking for putting all your eggs into one basket. You want to spread the risk a little bit. And so, for example, if you were managing a fund and you bought Google, and you also bought a Netflix stock, perhaps, or if you bought Google and Apple, say, just two probably highly correlated markets, when they go down, they'll go down together. When they go up, they'll go up together. So all you're ending up with is a bigger position in that market. So you may as well forget one and just put more into the other, and then you've got the same sort of risk. But when you're trading equities and commodities and then Bitcoin ends up doing what it wants to do at various times. It should be a risk on asset. I think it will benefit much more from risk on than risk off. Some people say it's the ultimate risk on asset, but there is an argument that when people get worried, they will move into gold and Bitcoin because they want to move funds out of the system. So it has this interesting quirk that it could be either, and it kind of depends on the market. The net effect of that is there are certain things that should push it higher. Now, remember, the equity markets rallied very aggressively before Bitcoin moved. It took a while for Bitcoin to start rallying whilst the equity markets were flying ahead. And then Bitcoin caught up and went into new highs. And now it looks like the equity markets are consolidating, moving lower, and Bitcoin's moving a bit lower. So sometimes they move together and sometimes they don't. So it's uncorrelated enough to be an asset that you could invest in it and have it separate and not cause too much of a correlation risk in your portfolio. So I would class it as more of a risk on asset, as I've said before. But there are times when psychology and sentiment means that it doesn't work as a risk on asset, if that makes sense. It works as a risk off asset, or something unusual will happen in the markets, like the terrorist attacks, and that changes sentiment for everybody for a bit, and then people start to worry about where they put their money. They might put it into the dollar, and sometimes that can inversely affect the price of Bitcoin. Sometimes not. It just really depends on where the sentiment is. I think that the move in the dollar was more of a test of a top of a range, because this move, or whatever, the kind of tensions in the Middle East with Iran and Israel, I think there was an anticipation and build up to it, and it feels like that's dissipated now. And on top of that, we've got this talk of interest rates not going up, which I think is pretty much in line with what we would have thought before. But it depends on the mood of the market as to whether they take that as a positive, and you'd expect them to take it as a positive when they've been worrying up till that point about interest rate rises and other things going on. So the market had shifted too much into the fear side of things, and that had made the dollar go up a lot against the Japanese yen, and that's turned down really hard, really fast. So sentiment has changed very, very quickly. And so now we should have a clear run, hopefully, at the fundamentals, whatever they are, whatever the market decides they are going forward. But a consolidation anyway is not a bad thing. The equity markets have had a really good run, and them going down for a bit is not such a bad thing at all. In fact, the UK stock market was really underperforming very badly against the US and some of the European counterparts, and that is now going up ahead of everything else. So things are going in waves. But one of the most important things is also something I've been talking about, that I think is the key to all of this, and that is China and Hong Kong. And I'll show you those charts. I've been talking about how they should go up, and they've been roaring up. They've had a really good week, and I think those are the ones that are going to really start to see some money piling into crypto assets further down the chain.
Yeah, do you want to show us what's going on with those markets? Because you did call that.
Yeah, sure. So let's have a look. So let's start off with, here's the Dow. Oh yeah, we've got the Dow up here. See, we've had this run up, saying this move today, 420 points. That's a decent rally, but it's a decent rally on a correction. So I still think we need to be careful. We might see a move up and then it come down again. We've seen Bitcoin do that. So broadly speaking, nothing's changed. Still bullish. This is just a correction. We get them, and it's good that we've seen one because it was getting overheated. S&P 500, less of a correction, but still, I think this does need to come off a bit more. And the NASDAQ, again, similar situation. Some individual NASDAQ stocks have lurched a bit lower, and perhaps we're going to see a bit more of a correction there. But that's touching the kind of bottom of the range as resistance. So that little compressed range there, which for me would have been a buy signal if it had taken the high out, but it's taken the low out with a very strong candle, and it's taken a couple of days to try or a couple of weeks in this case to come back up. So I think right here is where you might see a bit more selling. So I'm going to be a bit cautious on that. But in terms of the Asian markets, look, this is Hong Kong. See, we've had this breakout, very strong green candle, another strong one that's following. This is trend changing material. See, broken the trend line, now it's moving up. Same deal in China. We talked about the low around February and then a consolidation, and now that's moving up. You have to remember that the sentiment in China and Hong Kong has been extremely bearish. All the analysts were talking about deflation and how those markets should be sold and there was more downside. And this is why technicals is so interesting sometimes, because, well, I find it interesting all the time, but it's particularly interesting at major turning points because you get this really kind of polarized sentiment towards one direction or another, and the chart doesn't confirm it. And that's the first sign that you're seeing a major trend change, and we'll see that eventually in Bitcoin. But going over to the other assets, so interest rates, let's just take that off log for a second so it looks a bit clearer, because this is what the Fed have said. 2-year and 10-year money has started to drop, and that's a really good sign. 4.5% in the 10-year, and that's also taken the heat off the US dollar. So remember, we were looking to see whether it could get to this 107 level, but it's now kind of topped out. Before, it had a consolidation of 1-2 weeks, and this third week it's gone down pretty hard. So if we get one more move down, overall, yes, it's still in this range, but if it breaks this upward trend line and starts to head here, then we could be in business if it breaks this low and starts to trend, because it hasn't trended for a long time. It's been in this consolidation for a very, very long time. This is the sort of trend we're looking for on the downside, and overall it's just been range bound. But it was just unusual that it was heading towards the top of the range when nothing really seemed to be driving it. Then we got the news, and now it makes much more sense. So how that leads us into Bitcoin is basically the topping pattern that we were looking at. And I'll just switch to the daily chart so you can see. It was this support here, 60,000. First of all, it was at just over 60, and then it broke it and had a bit of a rally, which is always, top's always a bit weird because they're volatile until the trend kicks in. Then it broke this 59,621 level, which was a fantastic support, but it's recovered it. So that can be quite frustrating, where you end up shorting, covering, shorting, covering. But the highs are still lower. So these highs are still moving down. And sure, it could, as we always say, nobody knows exactly where the market's going to go. Everything's probability. But it looks like it will move sideways and then potentially down a bit more before we see the next major move. And even if it just goes sideways from here, I still think it's due this sort of consolidation. And you put it into context of the rally. Anyone who's kind of really upset that the market is going down is probably has bought very, very late into the trend, and or just has an unreasonable expectation as to what the markets should do. When interest rates are around 5%, 5.25%, and the market is moving, 3 or 4% a day, that's huge volatility. There's massive volatility here, and this is unusual for any market. It's just that Bitcoin happens to be extremely volatile, and you have to, it can't always just keep going up. It has to have these corrections. And considering where its rally started all the way down here, 15,555 was the start. This is the first kind of major, I'd say, apart from this consolidation here, this is the first major pullback. So, and even if we take a step back and look at what the chart looks like, it's not that big of a pullback anyway. It would just look completely in line with an upward trend. Pull back to this line, even if it came to 53,410, which I think is possibly where it should come to as a minimum target before I'd get more excited about it going back up again. So it's on a daily basis, it's actually today had a really good bounce. So it seems to be enjoying a bit of short covering ahead of the weekend. You do see that on a Friday. People don't want to hold risk, even though it's open on a Friday. They're just a bit worried about what might be announced. So they've seen some profits on the way down and they just cover them. So we'll see again at the early start of next week how the market, really views this rally, whether it'll peter out and go sideways and then break this support again, or whether it's got more upside.
Yeah, usually there's a lot of momentum going into the halving as people get excited, and then the actual event happens and it just calms down for usually quite a while. So it's kind of addicting. There's a lot of dopamine when things are going up massively. And so when it cools off, you get no dopamine, and it gets kind of boring again. And I love these boring periods because that's when prices get cheap. People get depressed that it's not going to happen again. And we are in still the middle stages, the early middle stages of a bigger bull run. We're not to the blow off top part yet. That's the really exciting part. This is just setting up for that blow off top. And so those that are making smart choices can do really well. Got some suggestions in here. See you guys' suggestions in the chat. Burnett asked us to look at Polytrade. Bro asked us to look at Vanry and Velo. We should be able to get to that. We have a shorter timeline today than normal, but we don't have a really long list of what to look at. Why don't we get started and start taking a look at some of the suggestions from last week? That way we can hit some of these. Yeah, would
Sure.
you had Solana pulled up. You had mentioned Solana. Is it all right if we delve into Solana first and then we'll jump over to World Mobile Token?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Solana, I think is consolidation. I mean, just to give the kind of the short view, I think it will just consolidate before it then moves higher. But I like the way it's leaning on this prior breakout point. So I like these patterns because this gives you some time to jump into the trend. You get a high pullback, another high near to it, a pullback, rising lows, and then a breakout. And when the pullbacks come, they come back and rest on these prior supports. So you look at the moving averages, they're all up. So the trend is still up, still bullish. But it's finding some support around here. Now, that might not be enough to actually make it trend higher, but it could be enough just to push it sideways and it become a little boring, like you say. And then we'll go for this move over 204, which I think it's got a good chance of going for, once people are bored enough with the sideways grind and have taken their eye off the ball, that's probably when it'll start moving. Possibly June time, I would guess, as people are going into the summer holidays and stop thinking about the market, and then it starts rallying. But for the moment, I'm still bullish on it. I still think it's a good setup, and it may pull a little bit further, but there's some nice support in this zone. So anywhere down at the 120s to WM10s, I think is really good support. I mean, isn't it amazing that it's trading 142 and we're talking about 110, 120? I mean, that's a huge percentage move, but this is what you have to look at when the market's this volatile.
Yeah, what is crazy is Solana last year went as low as $8, and so it's massively up even at these prices. So it's 20x up from those lows. And so Solana, it would have been nice to time that perfectly. Had a really big move. I'm not buying Solana at these prices, even though I think it's going to go higher, because from here it might go 4x, 5x. I can't really say I know what it will go, but it's already 20x up. So if it goes 5x from here, that's 100x up from the bottom, which is an incredible move. It's just experienced a lot of that move already. So do I like Solana? I hope that Solana ends up being a power player. I think it's got great promise that it is. It is one of the early runners this bull market. It's been taking off, and I think it'll break previous highs. I think it'll do well. But a lot of those gains have been had, and I like to buy low. Now, Paul and I have different entry points because he trades so many markets. He can get in and out as he sees the right things. So he usually buys well during the run. Why? Because, well, he can always pull his money out and trade it in any market that's running. Whereas I'm just focused on crypto. So I like to buy when it's cheap and then patiently wait. Meanwhile, Paul might have made 20 different moves in 20 different markets. And so he waits for the run to be visibly happening and then makes his entries and then experiences a lot of that run. What would you say on this? Would you rate this a buy, wait, or sell at this price?
I would have to categorize it in time frame. So I'd say short term it's a wait, but I think long term it's a buy if I can.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's jump over to World Mobile Token, which has also been somewhat of an early runner in this bull market. Now, some things have run in this bull market, and some still haven't done much. World Mobile Token, definitely one of those that's run some.
Yeah, I mean, this is one that we talked about, wasn't it? That at one stage, I think we were a bit skeptical on it, and then we got this really nice base pick up in volume, and now it's doing nicely. So I rate this a buy. I think the technicals looks good. Lots of volatility though. I mean, you've really, I mean, who wants to deal with this sort of pullback or halving in price and then bouncing up again? That's pretty crazy. That's hard to deal with. But the volume had been going down on that pullback, and that's that's a good sign. And also, if you look at the lows, they're still rising, and again, that suggests that the market is being bought in the pullback. So I think we rated it a buy before, maybe a wait if it was here, but I can't really remember what we said about it last time. But overall, despite the volatility, the trend is still bullish, and I don't think that's changed. It's been trading quite nicely against technical levels. This 20 cents is such good support. Did get close to it at 22 cents, but again, that's a good sign that it bounced from there. And that looks like a real price. Sometimes you get these moves and it's not actually on the chart. It's just somebody's put the wrong data in, but that looks fairly like it did move down there and bounce back up again. Perhaps some form of bearish announcement that was maybe found out not to be true. I don't know. I wouldn't really speculate. But the overall structure of the chart is it's turning down and it's gone back up again. So you can see the downward trend and it's slowly recovering. And given that the broader market is a little bit more cautious, it's doing pretty well. So I still rate it on the buy side. If that's what I said last time, I think I did. I think we'd stay with that.
Yeah, so you put it on a buy. And I agree that this is in a bigger trend going up. And World Mobile Token is an interesting one. I don't know whether they make it really long term. They might. Essentially, this is the one that introduced a new way of getting coverage to areas where the major cell phone carriers wouldn't run the coverage out there, because World Mobile Token is able to do it for a tenth of what the major carriers is able to do, using like a balloon essentially that can float there semi-permanently for very inexpensive and get the coverage in those areas. So it helps like Africa. It helps places like actually Puerto Rico is a great example of a place that could really help. And bringing coverage to those areas where you have people that have cell phones and they want to be able to use them. So yeah, really interesting that this came through the crypto space. I think there is a use case for their token. I think in the short term, this bull run, it probably does pretty well. Long term, I have no idea if Tesla is going to end up connecting their phones to their satellites, their mobile link satellites. And, if that is the case, then Tesla might be the number one phone provider in another 5 years or 8 years. So there's a lot of competition in that space. But in the coming bull run, it's a narrative that people can wrap their mind around and understand. Let me share my screen. So share some of the things I look at. Their market cap is already 168 million. And that's because it's 4x up from the bottom. So it was all the way down to about, I guess, 10 cents, just under 10 cents. So it's 3.5x from the bottom, meaning it was about $60 million market cap. It's got part of that run. And this is a market cap that can go into the billions, maybe tens of billions. So it might have another 10x from here. It might have a 20 or 30x. So in that sense, I'm just going to wait. Like, I like this one, and it's going to make good money. Like, most people would die to get a 10x over a 4-year period. And this is the stretch where most things are going to make its gains over the next year. World Mobile Token has already made some of them starting back in, gosh, you could have got it back in October, really September for cheap. And now since September, so about 6 months, it's made 3.5x gains. And then over the coming 12 months, it'll probably make another 10 or 20, maybe even 30x gains. So for me, it's a wait, though. I've seen interviews with the founder, and I had one myself. I really like the team behind this. They're very bright. They're well connected in the crypto space. I'd love to see this project massively succeed. And maybe going forward, even with the satellite technology, maybe still local technology that's close to the ground will be necessary. And World Mobile Token has a permanent use case if that's the case. All right. So not that I don't think this can do really well. I mean, 30x, if it does 30x from here, is still amazing. That ends up being almost 100x for people that already got in. We'll just see where the market goes. But this was one of our viewer suggestions. Maybe I'm wrong on this, and it far exceeds my expectations. Just know that I'm just making my guess on where this could go. All right, let's take a look over at INDY.
Yeah. So this is Indigo protocol, and
yeah, this is the right one.
Yeah, not a lot of data really. Well, I suppose it's not too bad, is it? January, over a year, year and a bit. So it's not looking great, is it? It's coming back into support. I think this is one of those ones where, from a technical point of view, I would definitely be waiting and, if not selling. But really, there's such massive support down here at $1.28, which is actually the low here and the low here. And it's on its way to that $1.28. That perhaps that's where the buying should come in, or you put a buy there and put a stop wherever. Well, that's kind of how I would see it: buy against support and put stop below, see if it holds it, and if it doesn't, you get bailed out, and if it does, you may have got in at really good levels. I'd have to look at the fundamentals to see if there was something good about it, but overall the chart is just so rangy that unless it shows some change in sentiment, which would involve it taking out a high, considerable high, that was December 23, so it hasn't made a new high this year, and the all-time high is all the way up here. That would suggest a change in sentiment of some kind that would be worth jumping on the trend. Of course, there could be other signs before that, and I'm not necessarily saying you'd wait all that time, but it's just the things that it hasn't done this year. It hasn't taken out a significant peak from a major downward trend. It's just basically going sideways. So I think it's a wait for me. And if this is one of those ones where if you happen to know something really interesting about it fundamentally, then the market might have missed it. Could be moving into a really good support point, and you might be able to consider legging in, which means buying small amounts as it goes down and then getting more aggressive when it starts to go in your direction. But I can't do that, and I wouldn't do that. I would just wait for the technicals to turn, and they haven't as yet. So for me, it's definitely a wait. And if it takes out this low, I think that'd be a really bad sign, $1.28. So I'd be very careful if it does that.
Yeah, this was another suggestion, and it's on the Cardano blockchain. Essentially, let me share this about Indigo protocol. Indigo is an autonomous synthetics protocol for on-chain price exposure to real-world assets built on Cardano. Indigo allows anyone to create synthetic assets known as I-assets using currencies such as stablecoins and Cardano. They have the same price effect as holding the asset being replicated. This allows you to gain profit from an increase in price of an asset without owning the original asset myself. Now, interesting. So real world assets, which is a narrative that I think will do well this bull run. Now, I do tend to think that a lot of the future of real world assets and having on-chain real world assets probably will go to the massive players out of the US like BlackRock. This coming bull run, probably some real world asset crypto companies will do really well because that narrative will do well. So this one has a good chance to do well, in my opinion. It's currently at an $8 million market cap. I think later, as Cardano comes back in the narrative and real world assets come into the narrative, this one could do really well. I do like smaller market caps like this. I like to buy them on a lower trend line. Now, perhaps it breaks this and goes lower. Do note that a lot of their supply is not in circulation yet. There's only 5.1 million in circulation out of a total supply of 35 million. So their fully diluted market cap is 56 million, even though their market cap itself right now is just 8 million. I don't know what their vesting schedule looks like. That would be pretty important to know if I were going to go and buy Indigo, is what is their vesting schedule look like? And maybe you can find out. Let's see if sometimes when I search Indigo ICO, let me see. Looks like a fair launch. Let's see if we can get a feel for. Probably it's out there. Searching for it, you'd be able to get a better feel for what things look like. 40% goes to stability pool, 25% towards team distribution, 10% towards stakers, 15% asset liquidity providing. Okay, so yeah, I don't know what their vesting looks like, but that would be an important part of the decision of deciding to buy it. I do like this lower trend line. I would say it's just a small buy. Like, I would not go big on this till I knew a whole lot more information, but I like what I'm setting up. I want exposure to real world asset companies, but I'm cautious on it. And I'm cautious long term. For this bull run, I do think that narrative can do well. And that's maybe this one fits some of the exposure I'm looking for. All right. Let's take a look at OMI.
Yes, indeed. So OMI is one of those ones that is now back testing support, and I guess you would say it's really good, a really good opportunity to get in here. And support was indicated from before 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the 5th time it's come down here. That this is an interesting area for the market. It's proven to be support. It's really built up as massive support, and in some ways that worries me a little bit, because every time we get close, I'm nervous that it's going to get pushed through and you'll see a purge of positions, even if the long term is to the upside. So, you know, I would say it's a tentative buy down here just because it's held this support. I'd rather that it had actually got a bit more of a margin and started rallying from that. You know, I know you can't tell markets what to do, but going right up to the wire like this does put me on edge slightly from a technical point of view. But you know, longer term, there are good reasons to think that this might be a really good area, good strong area. Well, you know, it's shown to be a good strong area. It's just a question of whether it's going to do a major rally from here, or not. And it seems to do what it wants. So it wouldn't surprise me if this went up when everything else went down, simply because it seems to be very uncorrelated to the broader market. You know, I know that the bigger picture should really help certain things, and when everything's going up, that can lift all boats, as we say. You know, rising tide lifts all boats. But I think with certain projects, they will just move at their own time, and this one seems to be one of those. So I would say it's a tentative buy, and from a disciplined technical point of view, if it does close below this low, with all those zeros and 544, I'd say on a 3-day basis, because you've got to give it a bit of a filter given how volatile these markets can be. Any buy I put in here, I would just bail out and wait for it to cross back on to the upside. Even if I buy it higher, I don't mind that, as long as I'm going with the trend. And that's just a technical thing. It's not it's nothing to do with the fundamentals at all. So for me, short-term buy, but a very sort of small position, testing this support, being very cautious if it does break. If it does, I would just get out and then rebuy it as it goes back up again, and just wait for that confidence to come back in.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites out there. So I use this to buy more OMI, and I'm really excited about it. Now, I was having a talk with somebody yesterday, and they were saying, well, what if OMI goes even cheaper than this and it breaks this support? And I said, fantastic. I would buy more because of the fundamentals of that I understand of what's going on behind. If I didn't know the fundamentals going on behind it, I'd be scared to death if it broke this support. But I follow the company significantly and what's going on, and the company has tons of good things. So if the token happens to get even cheaper, then I would get way excited. Specifically, the comment came in requesting a COMI from Living on the Bitcoin Standard, and he asked us to look at it. He said OMI chart looks to be in Wyckoff phase C, ready for phase D. So Wyckoff phase C is essentially right here, ready for phase D. And I would say you can see some similarities to what he's talking about. Let me go to the daily and kind of line this up. So we see it testing these lows again, like what he's talking about. Let me go back here. So coming down, testing the lows. In fact, in this phase C of it, it hits its bottom, and then it's ready to take off. Well, is that the case? I think the probabilities are good that it is the case. And that's why I'm buying now, because I think this really big accumulation phase, which came back and hit essentially a triple bottom, came up, went down here when the news broke out of what was happening in Iran and Israel. Plus, they had a problem where all the COMI on the one exchange you could get a COMI as OMI's token. If you're in the US, well, that exchange like shut down, and everybody who had their tokens on it got held up, and it's not clear what's going to happen there. Well, that dropped it one more time back to these lows, but it's hit a pretty solid support here. Now, should it break through, it might come down quite a bit, and I hope that it breaks through. I don't know that it will. If I knew that it would, I would not be buying here. I would just wait till it got cheaper. But I've been buying down here again and grateful for this pickup because the future price of this, I think, does really well. I feel like the probabilities for my own investment are really good, and that's why I'm buying more. So for me, it's definitely a buy at this. Many people are scared to death what's going on with COMI. I feel very strong about it, and I've been accumulating a lot more. Great suggestion. Let's take a look at our next one, which is Myria.
Yeah. So Myria, I know that's one that you like. But what does the chart look like? Is that up to date? Yeah, that looks like it's up to date. Yeah, I think we were talking about this from a technical point of view as being in a consolidation correction. Again, we've got this, let me just show you this really interesting retest of prior support, which is something that us technicians look for. What was resistance, if we take the chart over like this, see where it's stopped and made a high, it then comes back and retests that and bounces on it as support. So these major levels are ones that we watch, but the trend is down still, and it's great that it's getting support around this half a cent area, but it's not trending up as yet. So I think longer term, its buy signal was all the way down there, and we talked about it then. Would you be convinced to get out here if you bought in that area? No, I think it'd be still a buy, and it'd be fair enough to be looking at the long term. But coming into it as a neutral and having no position, I think this level's a really good one to buy against, but I would possibly want to wait a little bit longer just because this trend is down. I want to see that trend line break as a first step. And it could just be that first step, breaks next week. And then, we could get in and make a buy over this area here, 7th of a cent. And that, for me, I don't mind that it's a little bit more expensive. It just shows that the market has changed its dynamic from the beginning of March to where we are now. But I think most likely what will happen is it will just go sideways and just consolidate for a bit longer, and then it will turn up possibly later on with everything else. It may have a fairly good correlation to some of the other bigger markets, because I think this one's a little bit more mature. But for me, it's short term, it's a wait, but long term, I think the long term players who've bought it aren't really want to get out. There's no reason for them to get out at this stage. So I think it's a buy for the big picture for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. In that, Myria, I don't know what it's going to do in the short term. So this is what I call the Alex Becker pump. So blockchain gaming, I think, is one of the best narratives for the upcoming bull run, and I think Myria will do well. There's other ones I like as well. I hold a lot of Myria myself. I hope that they launch a really, really good game, though that's less than clear to me if that's how it's going to play out. They have their own layer 2. They've done a good job setting up their layer 2. It really comes down to, do they hit massive traction if they launch a really, really good game? Possibly if they launch a really, really good game. If they don't launch a really good game, they'll probably still do very well during the bull run, just not as well. So Alex Becker covered blockchain gaming and specifically called out Myria, and it took it from these lows of where I was saying this was an amazing buy zone. And yeah, it ran all the way up to here. From the bottom of here, it was about a 16x. And then it's just retraced as blockchain gaming has come out of the highlight and people aren't thinking about it as much, and the narrative is focused on other things. So it's been retracing, and I like to see that because I like to buy cheap. And after this pump, it made Myria unbuyable because there were just other deals that hadn't pumped yet that were a much better price. I would like to see it come down further, like Paul was talking about. I can't say, in fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday and he's like, what do you think about Myria? And I said, I just like to see it cheaper still, so I know that it's a really good buy. Now, if I knew they had an amazing game in the pipeline that's going to be incredible, then maybe this would be a good enough price. But for now, it's just a wait at these prices. I would like to see it cheaper, and it's getting cheap. It's still about 6x from the bottom, though. So I'd like to see it a little bit cheaper. If it breaks down into this zone, maybe it's cheap enough to buy again. I don't know that it'll get this cheap again, but this cheap again would massively put it in the buy zone. Because when I'm looking at crypto, I'm looking at what is the best probabilities coupled with a really good price. And I think that has really good probabilities here of doing well, but I want to see a better price because there's better options right now. All right. Wealth Abundance asked a question. Is the DEX link on Coinbase app where we sign up to buy fairly newer alts? I don't really walk people through this, but I feel your pain of I'm tired of getting access too late, but I'm not big on tech, although I know how to trade. That's a lot of crypto traders, is like they're not necessarily computer scientists, but they're tech savvy and trying to figure out how to use all these different things to trade the earlier coins that say aren't on Coinbase. That's where a lot of the growth can be, but there are different places to get them. Some different exchanges, sometimes using Uniswap, sometimes using some different decentralized exchanges. And there are walkthroughs essentially on YouTube by many people on how to do exactly that. You just have to search it. And I would watch a couple different videos before I would try any of those, just to make sure it's not some scam trying to get you to connect your wallet to something you shouldn't be connecting it to. All right. Wes's sentiment. OMI has only been going down for 3 years, and Wes sees that as a bad thing. We call that a bear market coupled with accumulation. That's often exactly what the charts look like before it does really good. So, Wes, you see that as a bad thing. I see that as a great thing. We completely disagree on what that means. All right. Chumby Valley, CHMB.
Yes, indeed. One that we haven't looked at for a long time, but I think is kind of interesting because of the technical structure. Very smooth downward trend. Then it's moved into this basing phase, which I'm trying to show just below where I've got the cursor. So if you just look at the lows here, that looks like a left shoulder, head, right shoulder, which triggered at these points here. And it's come back for another dip. Still that happens when the market is basing from a long-term perspective. You have to remember that this has been effectively trading sideways, or it's back at the same level from November 22. So one had bought it here, you'd still be looking at like a neutral position, and no profit. So that what that does is sentiment wise is make people kind of lose interest in it. But there is some evidence of some buying interest, or what we call accumulation, over this period. The highs are getting lower. Sorry, the highs are getting lows are getting higher, I should say. And often that comes against resistance. All these resistance levels are pretty much at the same level. And so there's this kind of build up trigger point where once it breaks and comes back to it again, it's telling you, yeah, it is really trying to take the highs out. So I like that. And it also gives a place for short-term traders to put their stops here and here. And those are, relatively close at this point. So there's, I wouldn't say minimal risk, but there's a good logical marketplace or technical place where you can get out if you're wrong, but perhaps play the changing sentiment and acceleration of the trend when it eventually happens to the upside. So I think it's reasonable that you could still wait here. I think that is a valid strategy because it is still working its way up. This is one where I might think, well, just park some money there and forget about it, and then I'll look at it, put an alert if it trades through this. What's that? 3 zeros and 52 level. Put an alert just ahead of it, buy a little bit, and then add a bit more if and when it breaks through that. But it may not, do much for a few weeks or months yet. But I do like the way the chart looks. I think it's nice the way. Actually, is that even? Yeah, that is it up to date. I thought for a moment that it wasn't 24, but it has actually got it. But I like the way it's made its downward trend. It's made its base. We're just waiting for that next step, which is the reversal of that trend. And once we get that signal, there could be some really good upside.
Yeah. Now, Game Trove covers this one a bunch, and you find him here also in the comments. His channel. So, Chumby Valley, is a blockchain game, and there's a lot of smaller blockchain games that might do really well during the coming run. It just has to do with how good their game and how much traction they get. But when they have a really low market cap like this does, so the market cap's at 3 million. So if it goes to a $300 million market cap, that's 100x from here. And so this is a good one to do your research and probably watch Game Trove's videos as he walks through, so you can get a feel for, does this game have a chance to get some traction? Because if so, then that's not even a really high market cap for a bull market. If it goes to a $3 billion market cap, that's 1,000x. So it really has to do with how good is the game. And the best way to research that is watch his videos, because he's covered this one extensively. I like the chart. I like to see this nice rounded bottom. Just like in real life, we like nice rounded bottoms. I love them in the charts as well. So it's a good sign that the consolidation is in, and it's got an upward trend. It looks like 28% of the tokens are in circulation. So I don't know what the token distribution on this is like. Game Trove might have a better idea of that. He's spoken with a team and looked at it much more extensively. Loved Chris's comment here. Where'd it go? Oh, by the way, Senate or Sour D asked us to look at Senate. That's a great one. We'll have to move quickly to get some of these out because I know Paul has to run soon. So if you want to queue up, we'll take a look at Polytrade.
Sure.
And then Vanry, then Senate. Where was Chris's comment? Totally made me laugh. It was about Bumper.
Oh, yeah, it was Bumper and OMI. Yeah, that was funny.
So, yeah, he said we should like all riot till we get Bumper to cover OMI. Where did that go? I cannot find it for the life of me. Till we get Bumper to be able to, so it can protect the downside of OMI. I thought that was pretty funny, and now I can't find the comment.
Yeah, I did see it, though. It was definitely there somewhere.
I like Ecomi and VV silence while working with global entities. So easy to dump on OMI, but in my opinion, it will hit hard. I completely agree with you, Curious George, completely. That's why I've been stocking up on it at these prices. It's just like, I just love it. It's so juicy at these prices, nice, cheap prices. More than half the people complaining about how terrible it is, and they're just frustrated with down prices. That's usually when the best pickups are. And so I love that period. Where do I see the market cap for OMI going in the bull run? Much, much higher. I would love to see a 30-cent OMI, which would take the market cap to $100 billion. Many people agree or think that will never happen. I can't say it will this bull run. I just hope it will. And I think that there's a chance. And that chance isn't really high. It's maybe a 30% chance. But it is there. All right, let's jump over to Polytrade.
Yeah, Polytrade. What an interesting market. I remember looking at this when it was outperforming everything. And it seems to be that it's slightly ahead of the game. Maybe it's kind of a few months or a little bit more ahead of everything else. So could this be telling us that we're going to see a bigger correction in Bitcoin? I don't know, but it was definitely ahead and then has corrected. It's in terms of it moving into a new high. There's not many that we see actually do that in terms of altcoins. But the strength in this upward trend was very clear when we last looked at it because it stuck out like a sore thumb compared to everything else. Now, percentage terms, obviously this correction is absolutely massive and very difficult to deal with. But in kind of market or charting terms, it looks fairly reasonable given that the market has gone into a new high and it's come back to test support. So I think anything that does this, anything that's able to break into a new high, even if it does come back below and have quite a substantial retracement, it's still ultimately showing that it had that strength to do it in the first place, and it would just build up again. It just got a bit ahead of itself, perhaps. So I think long term it's still a buy. Short term, it's leaning against this support, which is again a good place for traders to come in. You see that they're actually coming in to buy as we speak. So we have seen a little turnaround and a tiny spike there, but the chart is turning around from a short term point of view. I know that's not very much, and that's not normally enough for me to say definitively that it's changed its trend, but it's doing it at such an interesting point where there's some really good support that I think it's fairly reasonable to say that it's fallen enough. But overall, I like the fact that it had actually taken this high out, and I think it will have another attempt at it, even if it does go a bit quiet, a bit sideways, does what it did here for a while, and then people get bored with it, and then it makes another run. So short term, yeah, it might just go sideways. It could become boring, but I think long term it's a buy. So perhaps if I say short term it's a wait and long term it's a buy, I think that would be a reasonable outlook for me.
Yeah, really quick about Polytrade. Polytrade is global gateway to tokenized real-world assets backed by and partner with industry giants MasterCard, Polygon, AlphaWave, and Matrix Partners. Polytrade's marketplace brings together tokenized T-bills, credit, stocks, real estate. So they're an early mover in this space, and you see a little bit what can happen in the token. I mean, this is just a massive run. If we go from the bottom where it hit 5 cents and it went here all the way to $3. So what is that? 20? That's a 60x. It's having a little bit of retracement, and still the market cap's fairly low on it. It's just 48 million. If they end up being in a primary mover position in the real world asset space, then they can go a lot higher than this. Where can you get it? You can get it on gate.io, MEXC, which is available, I think, still with a VPN from the US. Uniswap available. Uniswap v3 Polygon means you can get it really cheap through Uniswap on the Polygon network as well. So it's pretty easy to get. Gosh, I don't know what to think about it. It's had such a massive run. I don't like to buy after it's already gone up. Still, it's what, almost 5 cents, like 20, like 30x, not quite 30x from the bottom. I feel like I've missed some of this move. I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. I guess I would have to get a better feel for what the future looks like because the market cap is still really low. So for me, it's just a wait in that I don't have enough information on this, that possibly because the market cap's so low still, it would be worth a move. Possibly like some of the gains have been had. I just don't know. Let's move over to, just to move it along real quick, let's go to Vanry and then Senate.
Sure. How are you spelling Vanry?
VANRY.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's, that came up and then disappeared, didn't it? Where's it gone? No. Okay, I'll go to
it's like Vanar chain, VANAR.
yeah.
There we go. Got it.
Yeah, it just didn't turn up. Sometimes it doesn't show up on Coin Trader Pro. Right. So, well, gosh, that looked really bullish, and then suddenly when the chart dropped in, it looked less bullish. Let's have a look. What have we got here? Big picture. So if we take this area here to where we are now, we're still in a very neutral position. So I'd like to think of the psychology of how long-term traders are dealing with the market. And, it's pretty much gone sideways, going back to 21, 22. So that is a big headwind. But the big upside is from this low, how we got this change in sentiment. It was trading in a very bearish fashion, turned around at the same time as the big stock market move in October last year. And this is a really lovely technical pattern where it just goes sideways. You see how those lows are almost all in a line, and then it breaks out on a really sharp move, and we get this really nice upward trend. So I think on balance, it is a buy. I mean, correction had to come in. I mean, it was just going up too fast, and it might seem why would you want it to correct? But you do need the market to correct. As I keep saying, these are big percentage moves, and it needs a consolidation sideways phase. People take profits, and then we see how much profit gets taken and whether new interest comes in and where that comes in. That tells you a lot about where the trend is going to go next. So it looks like it's had its correction, and it's just going to move sideways for a bit, and we'll build up for another move to the upside. The only slight fly in the ointment is that it is this long-term kind of balancing of where it was before to where it is now, and that might mean that this area that it's in now could be a bit of a battle, because long-term holders who were wearing it all the way down here just get tempted to get out and just go, right, I've got back to flat or maybe a small profit, and they just jump on it. And that's possibly what's happening in this area. So if it manages to get through it and through into this new high, that would be super bullish, because it would say that it's managed to deal with all that supply and it's still going up. And given that the momentum from here has been fantastic, I'd say there's a very good chance it's going to do that. And I wouldn't mind backing it for it. But by the same token, there's other things that are smoother and clearer that you could, buy instead. So there is that balance of, if you're only trading this, or have you got a choice to trade something else. I like to look at it as though when I look at a market, this is the only thing I can trade, and would I trade it at this point? And that's how I kind of give my opinion. And for me, if this was the only thing I could trade, I'd say it was reasonable enough to be in an upward trend for it to be a buy. So I would go with that. But I'd also have my kind of expectations set to it may go sideways for a bit longer, just because of the reasons that I outlined with regard to the supply in this area. But overall, I think it's a really interesting one, and one that we should come back to.
It is really interesting. What's so interesting is I was checking out what markets they're on. So they're on Binance, they're on Coinbase as well, but the ticker symbol is different on Coinbase. It's TVK, which used to be the ticker symbol, I think, for Terra Virtua Collect, which I think they changed to Virtua. But like, why they're different, I don't know. You don't see that very often. About Vanry Chain. Welcome to the world of Vanry Chain, a cutting-edge blockchain ecosystem where efficiency, speed, and security converge. The heart of this revolutionary platform is Vanry, our native gas token designed to fuel transactions in smart contract operation with the Vanry Chain. It doesn't really tell us what's special about this. It is a $220 million market cap. It looks like about 54% of their tokens are in circulation. Still far from previous all-time highs of 2021. I like that they've been around for quite a while. And they're on that climb towards its previous highs. It's about 9x up from the bottom, which is interesting. So it pulled back off of its 32-cent highs. So it's down about almost 50% from its recent highs. Whether it'll continue this climb up right away or consolidate more, I have no idea. None. And I don't know about the long-term value of this because I don't know this project very well. Bro probably knows it much better. Maybe he can tell us. In the meantime, let's jump over to our next suggestion, Senate by Sour D. And I don't know that we can get to Moon River and Moonbeam, though I'm bullish on both of those. Let's take a look at Senate.
Yeah. I mean, we've got the Wednesday one coming up, quicker than usual because we're doing this on a Friday. So, hopefully we'll be able to cover them in short order on the next one. With regard to Senate, we've got, I've got the 29th, 30th of April, so I haven't got up-to-date prices. So I'm a bit, it looks like it's probably gone down a little bit more from here, given that this trend is down, it's sitting on support. But I'd like to just double check the current price here. But just while we do that, I think we talked about it last time as being a wait, because it was pulling back, and it doesn't seem to really have changed much. It's still pulling back against the trend, and whilst longer term, I think there's an argument for buying because it's changed its downward trend, it's moving up, and there was clearly a sentiment change at this point. For the short term, it's still corrective, it's still looking heavy, and it might have a bit more to go, so I don't mind waiting. It's at the top of this really sharp bar. Now let me just check the date on that. Is that, yeah, that's a bit strange, isn't it? Why is that not giving us an up-to-date price? Oh, okay, it's just hiding behind there, is it? I don't know why it's doing that, but it is. Or is it? No, it's not an up-to-date price. I don't know. I don't like it when we don't get an up-to-date price because, in theory, anything could have happened, and I'm talking about a market that could be anywhere. But given that we haven't got the current price, I would say it still looks corrective, and I would still be waiting a little bit before jumping in. What we sometimes do is take this range, take like 50%, 61.8%, and look for those as support points. When it bounces hard off those levels, that confirm support and buying, and those are technical areas to consider for getting in the short term. And from the short term, that can turn into the long term. But what I do like about it was there was this change in trend, as I say. So structurally, it is trying to move up. It's not like this is near a low and breaking into lows, major lows. It's correcting this first phase of a trend, which is, lots of markets do that and then break out and move higher. So I would use a tool, a very simple technical tool here. I'd put a trend line across those highs and wait for them to break as a first step to get in. to kind of break it out of this consolidation phase to tell me potentially that it could be over. So you could do it against two things. One, you could do it against or buy against support as it's going down, like what was prior resistance can be support, or prior support can be support. The next one is taking out significant resistance points. But within that is, as it's correcting, it's forming a downward trend line. And that downward trend line, once it's broken, that can give you the sign that the market's changing trends. So that's what I would draw across there, a downward trend line, and wait for that to break before stepping in or adding to the position. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. So for you, it's a wait, and
So wait.
I can't blame you for that. I like this project a lot, and I like where the market cap is at. It's at a $9 million market cap, and I hope it goes lower. And it's really close to this support that if it breaks down, it might get a whole lot cheaper. And I love to buy low. So I would love for it to break this support so I can really load up on it. $9 million market cap. I like Dan, who is the CEO of this project. I met him at NFT NYC. I had spoken to him a little bit on Telegram prior, met him in person, really liked his focus and drive on making things happen. He has done a lot of side games while they're building the bigger games so that the community has something to play and to test with. So I feel like he's doing a good job on building the game too. This is one of their two tokens. They have the CEDIS token and the Senate token. The Senate token is used for a number of things as well as governance. We're looking at it because the price is cheaper on market cap. So market cap of CEDIS is all the way at 75 million. Senate, though, it has similar use cases. You know, it was at 8.8, just went up to 9 million, but it's still fairly cheap. And I hope it gets cheaper. So for me, it's like a small buy. Just a small buy, hoping it breaks through and comes down cheaper, because it might. A lot of the pressure has come off of blockchain gaming. I'd like to see a bigger retracement as I'd like to see people panic out of it. The ones that just have short-term thinking, they haven't learned how to be real long-term investors yet. And if that happens, it might start to free fall. And if it free falls, that'll get really juicy. So just a small buy, but a bigger wait, seeing if it gets a whole lot cheaper, which is what I hope. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Paul, thank you for joining us. I know you have a lot of things going on today, so thanks for making some time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, guys. Just to say on the Senate, I just got an up-to-date price, and it's pretty much where it is now. But yeah, always enjoy it. It's an important week, and look forward to the next Wednesday. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
For those of you in our Patreon group, it gives you access to the private Discord. And really through Patreon, there's not a lot of discussion through Patreon. It's really used as a gatekeeper for the Discord. And the Discord is where all the chat is. So we're having our Friday Rainmaker chat right as I finish this. So we're a little bit behind, but I was able to squeeze Paul into this time slot. So I had to make that happen. So cool. If you're in the Discord, go ahead and join us. We'll see you in just a minute.